Picking the right option can be the most painful mistake you make as a new trader. It can cost you a lot of money. And in this video, I want to give you 3 types of trades I perfected with the MAT system that help you have a systematic entry for all of them. Long calls and puts, selling puts, and selling calls. I've done all 3 trades within the system we teach our students, and I want to teach you that systematic approach today because you're going to spend a lot of money doing this the wrong way. Let's not let that happen. But to further understand how to pick the right option with the right formula, first we have to understand the types of options and the underlyings that affect them. The most important thing to understand is implied volatility. This is huge for buying and huge for selling if you understand how it affects you. Implied volatility can be found on the bottom right on option strat. 32.8% is what Uber is at. And this means something to me when I'm buying and selling. And I'm going to tell you what that formula means. But if you're on Robinhood, if you're on Thinkorswim, if you're on Webull, this can be easily found within the option chain data. It's very apparent. So the very first thing you see here is that high IV and low IV can affect option buying. And here's how. High IV means your options are decaying fast. It also means that there's an expected large move that can happen. And that means it could also go against you in a big way, which means within days, within weeks, your options can go straight to zero. So that implied volatility is a good thing. It's also a bad thing. And I'll tell you how to work that into your favor. But low implied volatility, this is my favorite option chain to be a buyer on. And low implied volatility is anything under 50%, which is Uber right now. Uber's under 50%. I would be a buyer here, not a seller. That means if the setup works and it looks good, I would be buying calls. And what we'll teach you later in this video is the right expiration date. But what IV is telling us, if it's that low, is there's really not a large move expected. And if you can beat the expected move, that's how you make money as an option buyer. So big moves are less likely, and sometimes there's very small moves at all that are expected. So here is an implied volatility example. One of the stocks one of my students is obsessed with is IRIN. In IRIN, we've kind of coached him to be aggressive here with IRIN, but it's up 7% today. Why is it up 7% in a day? That's crazy. Well, the implied volatility is 93%. So off of a 1 month move, 90% is possible to go up or possibly down. So this is your 30-day expected move. And if it doesn't happen, what happens is the decay really, really hurts, especially if you're on short-term options. And if you don't get this move in your favor, that percentage is also what we call like a premium trap. Anytime you have high IV, it's sometimes telling you that the stock's very dangerous and there's a high chance it's going to fall hard. So you have to be careful with implied volatility as a buyer because for the most part, those high IV stocks can't go much higher. So this comes down to the very key point you need to take away, if anything, from this video. If you want to make money buying options, you need to have an actual entry. You have to have a reason to get in, typically on the weekly chart. For example, the MACD, for example, RSI. Or maybe you like an engulfing candle, or maybe you like a long wick candle. I like those types of things. I do a lot of this stuff on my Sunday and Saturday picks, but basically you need to have a dialed in reason you take trades if you're ever buying. And it shouldn't be because a YouTuber told you it was a cool play, it was a good setup. You need to understand why that is good for you. Because if you don't do this correctly, especially with high volatility plays, this is where you're not going to make money. This is where you're the statistic that is always losing as a buyer. So again, you need to beat 2 things when you're a buyer. You need to beat the expected move and the expected decay. So next up is the free leverage of low IV. Pepsi is one of my favorite plays. Called it out on the YouTube channel 2 months ago at the exact bottom. And since then, it's up over 100%. It's such an easy win because it's a quality name. Pepsi's not going anywhere. The IV is 15%, which means it's pretty much a free play for options. You're not paying much to get leverage. And so if the stock does actually move $1, $2, or $3, you're going to get paid a lot. If you could see here, we're at 148 now. If we move just, let's say, $5 higher, you're up 30% on this leap option. So I love low volatility for buying. I very rarely will go in the higher IV categories for buying unless it's a perfect momentum play. And technicals and entry, this is not something we're talking about today. I'm just trying to tell you the difference between buying and selling. So now let's get into how high IV affects cash secured puts or covered calls. So it's actually favorable for selling if you have high IV, right? So for example, Pepsi, 1 year out, if I sold this covered call, I can make a 8% return on my money. 8% in a year barely beats the market, right? So this is not a good trade. And it's because the implied volatility is so low at 15%. But if I looked at IRIN, and this is a covered call out till next year, this is $800 from a $2,000 trade. So that's almost a 40% return in a year. What would you rather have, 8% or 40? 40, right? If you pick the right stocks at the right time, high IV makes sense for option selling. So again, we come back to that same idea. High IV requires a good entry. So the higher the IV, the better your entry and execution needs to be, or else you're taking on too much risk that's going to backfire one day. And then low IV, we would just never sell options with low IV. I'm not going to tie up my money for a full year on Pepsi and get 8% return. That's crazy. We have trades inside the coaching program. We try to hit 8 to 10% in 30 days, honestly, and sometimes 60. So why would I tie it up for a year for the same return? So very, very careful going too low on IV and even going too high. It's kind of in the middle ground that's so important. So next thing we have to look at is this bid-ask spread affects if you should even take a trade or not. And if you understand this correctly, you're going to save a lot of money too. I've seen a lot of people get absolutely crushed just not understanding liquidity in the option chain and the buyers and sellers on it. The bid is the low number and the ask is the high number. As the option buyer, what you want to do is buy low, sell high, right? So you make the difference, entry versus exit. What that means is if you bought this option right now at 74 and you sold it at 77, you make $3. So you want to be buying low and selling as far and high as you can. So if you're trying to enter the trade, you're trying to enter it low. And if you're trying to exit the trade, the bid is where you make the least amount, right? So if you want to make the most amount of money, you have to enter at the bid and exit close to the ask. So the highest is the goal. The difference is called the spread, and the spread is what is like the hidden cost for you as a trader or an option seller. Right now the spread's $3. So let's say you bought this option at 74. You could buy at 77 because that's where you probably get filled. That's where more of the buyers or the more sellers are to match you. But that's a $3 difference, right? 74 to 77. So if you just save that $3 and you got entered into the trade at the lowest part of the bid-ask spread, over 1,000 contracts, that saves you $3,000. So that adds up over time. Just that little dollar here, dollar there. We have to understand the bid-ask. And when you're buying, you want to go as low as possible. And then when you exit the trade, it's the same thing. You're trying to get out at the highest end of the range. And if it's a $3 range, a couple bucks here adds up. So that's $6,000 over entry and exit. So this is actually the selling slide. Let me switch this. And as the seller, the only thing that flips here is entering and exiting. You kind of go backwards here. So when you're selling options, you want to get the highest price when you enter, and you want to buy it back at the lowest, right? So you keep the difference between the option when you get in and when you get out. So you keep it as it decays. So if the ask is at 77, I want to be getting filled there. I want to be getting the most amount of money as the option seller. And then when I get out, I want to get the lowest possible exit so that I can maximize this. So again, if you got in at 77 and you got the bid at 74, you saved $3 or you maximized $3 on the entry. Again, over 1,000 contracts, that's $3,000. Same thing on the exit. If you exit at the lowest part of the bid-ask spread as an option seller, you're getting $3 that you could have possibly saved. So over 1,000 contracts, that's $3K again. So you got to make sure you understand that, the difference between the buyer and the seller and how to maximize it. The reason this is important and the biggest takeaway is that the worst option chains look like this. You have the bid and you have the ask, and it's much further than my threshold I'm giving you here. 20% is where it's dangerous to do any trading. It's dangerous to do any option selling. You wouldn't even touch the option chain. When it's over 20% wide, you would just find another option chain. And 20% is basically if you times the bid by 20%. So 0.05 times 20% should be like $7 or $9. And you can see we're at 90, which means that the bid ask is like 180% different here. So this means like getting filled is going to cost you money because of this. It's the hidden cost of entry and exit. The bid ask spread is what you're paying every time you get in and out. It's a little bit of the bid ask spread you're going to pay. So for the previous example, if the bid ask spread here is $3, 74 and 77, you're typically going to pay a hidden fee of $1. Let's say it's $1 every entry and exit. This bid ask spread is $85, and you're paying a portion of $85, which is like $20, let's say, or 15. And that alone is a 1% cost based off the option money here in the collateral. So you're giving up as an option seller like 1 to 2% return because of that bid ask being so wide. As an option buyer, you're paying 50% at that point. So getting in and out, you're wasting almost 50% of the money getting in and out. So what you're looking for is the bid ask spread to be between 5 to 10%. And that's low cost. It doesn't cost much to be in that option chain. 10 to 20% is medium, and then 20% is outrageous. I would stay away from it. And the volume in the open interest isn't a factor you look at. It's just a relation to the spread. So the spread's going to be wide or close together because the volume in open interest is there. And you can just see by this option chain that the volume is 0 and the open interest is 47. So this isn't great. And this is shown by the bid ask being so wide. So it's super important you see that it's not a factor you care about, but if you want to understand why the bid ask is so wrong and so bad, it's probably because of that. And now let's get into the 3 metrics to figure out our 3 types of trades. Cash secured puts, covered calls, and then long options. Number 1, cash secured puts. This is the coaching program formula. We have IV needing to be over 50%. I use UBRL as an example. It's a trade we took with our students last 2 weeks ago. We closed for a profit. And what I do with this trade is I look for an option 30 days out that can make me a 5% return. And what happened was this trade here, the strike price is 28 that we took with the students. So 28 you can see here. The quick math is multiply this by 5. That's your 5% return. And the premium needs to be about 140. And you can see the premium when I entered this trade with the students was 150. So it's pretty close to 5% return. It's just a little bit higher. And that's totally cool. So that's my bread and butter trade I would ever put on in the coaching program. That's how we're hitting a 4-month win streak right now. And we go for 30 days out because that allows us to maximize our money and not get stuck. And then we go for 5% return because that allows us to hit more profit than the markets would give us in a year. So what happens is when the trade starts clicking away, we might be out early. And you can see when I pull up the trade today, it's returned 60% of the premium. All that means is that this $150, you're not collecting the full amount, 150, right? So your goal is to get this as fast as possible, get 2-3% return on your cash as fast as you can. And we got this money in 10 days since entering. So that was about 3% return in 10 days. So now we get our profit, we take our money out, we exit the trade. And for a cash secured put, that means buying it back. So the beauty here is you get to maximize your cash here. You get to be in a pretty safe expiration date. And sometimes you get 2 or 3 of these trades to click off in a month. So that'll push you over a 5% return. The next type of trade is the covered calls. And I run this a little bit different than most people on the internet. I'm still only doing stocks that have 50% IV. So if you're someone that likes Apple or you like Google, you're probably wasting your money's potential. You can make way more money just making a small flip. And that's what we teach a lot of people in our program. One stock I've been hammering out on this YouTube channel is Soxal. It's provided the most premiums for us over the last year. I think we've had 24 winning CSPs from this stock. And if we ever get a sign, this is kind of what would happen. We would be selling covered calls 2 weeks out. We would be going 2 strikes out of the money according to the market move system. So if we're at 27.30 here for Soxal, we go 2 weeks out, 1, 2. It's about 18 days. And we go 2 strikes higher than the current strike, which is at the money. So 1, 2. That brings us to 28.5. What happens here is that you could have the stock run higher and you still make money. You can make 9% return. So if in 2 weeks the stock pushes up, we hit 28.50, we would exit for 9% return. The beautiful thing I like to do is I like to wait for the stock to already push up 5% or even 10%. So this gives me more in the bank. So if I was to exit in 2 weeks, I'm not getting 9, I'm getting 9 plus 5, which is 15%, or even 20 if I wait for more of a move. So I like to have a short-term expiration date. I like to have a strike price close to the price of the stock, and I like to get out around that 20% mark. So the exit strategy, we let this expire, we lose the stock, or if we are out of the money, we'll just do more covered calls again. So we just keep writing covered calls basically. And most people are probably here because they want to know how to buy calls and puts. And that's fine. I want to go through the selling portion first because that's where you're going to be more consistent, more profitable, and more successful. Now the selling calls, this is something we don't want anybody jumping into unless they just want to learn, just want to pay tuition, because it's very hard to be a consistent trader buying calls and puts. And honestly, it's going to lead to the most delayed path of your success and profitability and consistency. If you really wanted to quit your job and do this full time, you would never do this in the first year. You would focus on selling. So the first thing we have to understand is, just like buying, we talked about earlier, you need to have a good reason to get in. And the higher the IV, the better you have to be dialing that in. A reason to get in is not something I'm teaching today, but it could be an indicator, it could be a candlestick, could be an earnings report. Who knows? You have to dial in that system yourself because that's the only thing that's going to push you to be consistent as a buyer. And the structure I use is I like to use leaps. It's the easiest way to increase your win rate and not have a lot of losers. And I use it on safe stocks, to be honest. And I just look for a good entry, which is, for the most part, RSI. But if you have a good reason to enter, now the next thing you have to figure out is what's your expiration date. So 3 to 12 months out is the best window. If you're before 3 months, you're gambling. And if you're over 12 months, you don't really need that much time. So the time is based off your setup in your chart. So if you're on the weekly chart, you can dial this back to a 3-month option because the weekly chart moves faster. If you have an entry that triggers then, you're likely to get the move a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So if you can get the move in 3 weeks, I always apply this rule of a 3x multiple for safety. So if I believe a move is going to happen in 1 month, I want 3 months till expiration just to be safe. If I'm on the monthly chart, I'll push it to 12 or 9. So that's because it would take longer. For example, Pepsi took 1 month to finally move, or 2 months. And it moved 100% when it finally did. But having a 12-month option just allows me to be patient and wait and not really be sweating the position if it didn't move in 30 days. I do something unique here. I go 10 to 20% out of the money. This allows me to maximize the push. You always make more money if you're buying out of the money options. You just don't want to go too far out that it gets a little wild. So 10% out of the money for, let's say, Baba. Baba is my next big pick I'm pretty excited about. 10% out of the money is going to bring us to like 140. And 20% out of the money is going to bring us to like 150. So the furthest I would go is probably 150. If I want to get really crazy, if I was really bullish on the move, I might even go up to like 170. But what happens is it just increases the potential profit. And what I tell all the students is, if you hit a leap option that makes 1 to 200% return, you just sell half your position or all your position, and that allows you to pay for the losers. Because the losers will be 50%, maybe 70%. So you got to make sure you push at least the exit to up there, or else you're not going to be profitable, even with this further out expiration, even with a good entry. So that's all I got, everybody. Those are the 3 best ways to sell those puts and then buy those long calls based on my 10 years in the market. Hopefully this saves you a bunch of money. And if you guys want to watch a video on leap options, the best route to buying them in the next bull market, check out the video to the right of me. Peace out.